I was 65 years old when I stood in the crowded auditorium, my heart bursting with pride as I watched my son Jordan accept his medical school diploma. After working 3 jobs for years to put him through school, this moment meant everything. Then I heard him say those words that shattered my world. "This is my mom, the woman responsible for who I am today." But he wasn't looking at me. He was introducing another woman. I stood frozen, invisible, as my son denied my existence. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible to someone you've sacrificed everything for. The day I became a mother to Jordan was the happiest day of my life. My husband Thomas and I had tried for years to have a child, and when our beautiful baby boy finally arrived, we were overjoyed. We lived in a small Midwestern town called Millfield, where Thomas worked as a mechanical engineer at the local manufacturing plant, and I taught 3rd grade at the elementary school. Our life wasn't fancy, but it was filled with love and hope for the future. But everything changed when Jordan was 5 years old. Thomas was driving home from work during a thunderstorm when his car hydroplaned on the slick road and crashed into a tree. He died instantly. Just like that, I became a widow with a young son to raise alone. The first year after Thomas died was a blur of grief and anxiety. I worried constantly about how I would provide for Jordan on my teaching salary alone. Our modest savings quickly dwindled with the funeral costs and remaining medical bills from when Thomas had broken his leg the previous winter. I remember sitting at our kitchen table late at night, bills spread out before me, trying to figure out how to stretch every dollar. Despite our financial struggles, Jordan was thriving. Even as a young child, he showed remarkable intelligence and curiosity. He was particularly fascinated by science and medicine. I'll never forget the day I found him in the backyard, carefully bandaging a bird with a broken wing. He had created a tiny splint from popsicle sticks and was so gentle with the frightened creature. "I'm going to make him better, Mommy," he said, his face serious with concentration. "I'm going to be a doctor someday and fix everybody." From that moment on, Jordan's path seemed clear. He excelled in school, particularly in science classes. His teachers consistently told me at parent-teacher conferences that my son had a brilliant mind and exceptional potential. I beamed with pride at every science fair where his projects won first place, every perfect report card, every achievement large and small. Our bond was special during those early years. Without a father in the picture, Jordan and I became each other's whole world. On Friday nights, we had a tradition of making homemade pizza together and watching nature documentaries. Jordan would pepper me with fascinating facts about animals and human anatomy that he'd learned from library books. On Saturdays, we'd visit the local park, where Jordan collected leaves, rocks, and occasionally injured insects that he'd study under a magnifying glass his grandmother had given him. As Jordan entered middle school, his interest in medicine intensified. For his 12th birthday, I saved for months to buy him a professional microscope. The joy on his face when he unwrapped it was worth every extra shift I'd picked up to afford it. He spent hours examining slides of plant cells, water droplets, and anything else he could place under the lens. But raising a gifted child as a single mother wasn't easy. As Jordan's educational needs grew, so did the expenses. When he needed special science camps or advanced materials for school projects, I took on additional work. I began tutoring after school hours and on weekends to make ends meet. There were nights I survived on coffee and peanut butter sandwiches, so Jordan could have proper meals and the educational resources he needed. By the time Jordan reached high school, he was a star student. His biology teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, took a special interest in him and helped him apply for prestigious summer programs at university research labs. When he was accepted to one at Northwestern University, I was faced with the challenge of affording the program fee and transportation. I picked up night shifts at the local hospital, working as an administrative assistant at the front desk. The sacrifice was worth it. That summer program changed everything for Jordan. He worked alongside leading researchers, and returned home more determined than ever to become a doctor. His senior year, he applied to top universities with pre-med programs. When the acceptance letter from Princeton arrived with a substantial scholarship, we both cried with joy. The scholarship was generous, but didn't cover everything. Room and board, books, and other expenses still required significant financial support. I took out a second mortgage on our small house and increased my workload again. By then, I had left teaching to work full-time as a hospital administrator, where the pay was better, though I missed the classroom terribly. It was during Jordan's second year at Princeton that I first noticed the change in him. His calls home became less frequent, and when we did talk, he seemed distracted and eager to end the conversation. During his freshman year, he had come home for most holidays and breaks, eager to tell me about his classes and new experiences. By sophomore year, he had excuses for why he couldn't visit as often. "I've got to study for organic chemistry, Mom," he'd say. "It's really intense and I need the library resources here." Or, "Some friends invited me to their place for Thanksgiving. It's a great networking opportunity." I tried not to feel hurt. After all, wasn't this what I had worked so hard for Jordan to expand his horizons and build a successful life? Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something more was happening. That spring, Jordan mentioned he'd become friends with a classmate named Wesley Lawrence, whose father was a prominent surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital. Wesley had invited Jordan to spend spring break with his family at their beach house in the Hamptons. "It's a great opportunity to make connections, Mom," Jordan explained over the phone. "Dr. Lawrence could be a really important mentor for me." "That sounds wonderful, honey," I said, ignoring the pang in my heart. I had saved up for a modest spring break trip for us, but Jordan's future came first. "I'm so proud of you for building these relationships." It was during Parents' Weekend the following fall that I first met Patricia Lawrence, Wesley's mother. I had scraped together enough money for a bus ticket and a night at the cheapest motel I could find near campus. Jordan seemed unusually nervous when I arrived, constantly checking his phone and looking around as if worried about something. We were touring the campus when a tall, elegantly dressed woman with perfectly highlighted blonde hair approached us. She wore designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never worried about paying bills. "Jordan, darling," she called out, air-kissing both his cheeks. "We've been looking everywhere for you." Jordan's face flushed. "Mrs. Lawrence, hi. This is my mother, Maxine." Patricia Lawrence gave me a quick once-over, taking in my discount store dress and sensible shoes before offering a thin smile. "How lovely to meet you. Jordan has become such a fixture in our home. Wesley absolutely adores him." There was something in her tone that made me uncomfortable, a subtle condescension that suggested she viewed me as inadequate. Throughout the day, I noticed how Jordan lit up around Patricia, laughing at her jokes and referencing shared experiences I knew nothing about. That evening, when I suggested we have dinner together at a small Italian restaurant I had researched that fit my budget, Jordan hesitated. "Actually, the Lawrences invited us to join them at Le Chateau," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Dr. Lawrence is meeting with some colleagues from Johns Hopkins Medical School. It could be really good for me to make those connections." Le Chateau was the most expensive restaurant in Princeton, well beyond what I could afford. I saw the conflict in Jordan's eyes. He knew my financial limitations, but couldn't resist the opportunity. "You go ahead," I said, forcing a smile. "This is important for your future. I'm actually quite tired from the trip." "Are you sure?" he asked, but I could see the relief on his face. That night, I ate a sandwich alone in my motel room while Jordan dined with the Lawrences and medical school luminaries. When he texted me a photo of himself with Dr. Lawrence and the Johns Hopkins chief of surgery, I replied with enthusiastic encouragement, swallowing my hurt. As Jordan's undergraduate years progressed, the Lawrences became increasingly present in his life. Patricia sent him care packages filled with expensive snacks and clothing. They invited him on family vacations to Europe during summer breaks. Dr. Lawrence arranged prestigious internships and research opportunities that most pre-med students could only dream of. And with each passing semester, Jordan seemed to drift further away from me and closer to the life the Lawrences represented. His speech patterns changed, adopting the polished, confident tone of the wealthy. He began referencing wines, operas, and exclusive social events that were completely foreign to my world. When Jordan was accepted to Harvard Medical School, I was ecstatic. All our sacrifices had led to this moment, but my joy was tempered by the realization that medical school would be even more expensive than undergraduate education. With my resources already stretched thin, I made the difficult decision to sell our family home, the place where Jordan had grown up, where all our memories with Thomas lived. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment and took on a third job doing medical transcription work on weekends. My life became an endless cycle of work hospital administrator by day, waitress at a local restaurant in the evenings, and transcriptionist on weekends. I was exhausted constantly, but the thought of Jordan achieving his dream kept me going. During this time, I noticed Jordan's social media began filling with photos of him with the Lawrences, often tagged as family weekends or with my Boston family. There were fewer and fewer mentions of me or our hometown. In one particularly painful post, Jordan was pictured at a Lawrence family Thanksgiving with the caption, "So grateful for the family that makes everything possible." I stared at that photo for hours, tears streaming down my face. Had he forgotten who had worked 3 jobs to put him through school? Who had sacrificed everything to make his dreams possible? But I pushed aside my hurt and continued to send him supportive messages and what financial help I could manage. By Jordan's 3rd year of medical school, our phone calls had dwindled to brief check-ins every few weeks. When I had a health scare, a case of pneumonia brought on by exhaustion and overwork, Jordan barely acknowledged it. "You should take better care of yourself, Maxine," he said, using my first name instead of Mom, as he had started doing recently. "I've got to run to rounds now." The use of my first name felt like another small rejection, another step away from our once close relationship. But still, I defended him to my friends who expressed concern about his behavior. "He's just busy," I'd insist. "Medical school is incredibly demanding." I continued sending care packages with homemade cookies and small gifts I could afford, often receiving only a cursory text of thanks in return. Meanwhile, his Instagram showed photos of weekend sailing trips with the Lawrences and expensive restaurants I could never afford to visit. In his final year of medical school, I noticed Jordan had stopped mentioning me to his new friends and colleagues altogether. When I asked about visiting during a parents' weekend event, he discouraged me. "It's not really worth the trip," he said. "It's just a reception and some boring speeches. Save your money." Later, I saw photos online of the event with the Lawrences prominently featured beside Jordan, everyone dressed in expensive attire and beaming with pride. By the time Jordan's graduation approached, we were practically strangers. The invitation to his medical school graduation arrived just 2 weeks before the event, almost as an afterthought. It contained minimal information and no offer to help with accommodations. Still, wild horses couldn't have kept me away from seeing my son achieve the dream we had worked toward for so many years. I spent my small savings on a new dress for the occasion, got my first professional haircut in years, and carefully selected a graduation gift that held tremendous sentimental value: Thomas's watch. My late husband had always intended for Jordan to have it when he became a doctor. I had kept it safe all these years for this very moment. The bus journey to Boston was long and uncomfortable, but my heart was full of anticipation. I couldn't afford a hotel, so I planned to take the overnight bus back home immediately after the ceremony. As I approached the medical school auditorium, I spotted Jordan standing with the Lawrences near the entrance. My heart leaped at the sight of my handsome son in his graduation robes. I waved and called his name, but when Jordan saw me, his expression froze. He quickly looked away and ushered the Lawrences inside without acknowledging me. The sting of rejection was sharp, but I told myself he was probably just nervous about the ceremony. Inside, I discovered the Lawrences had reserved front row seats while I found a spot in the back of the auditorium. Throughout the ceremony, I blinked back tears of conflicting emotions, pride in Jordan's accomplishment and pain at the distance between us. When Jordan's name was called, and he walked across the stage to receive his medical degree, I stood and applauded louder than anyone, though I doubted he could see me from my distant seat. In that moment, despite everything, I felt a surge of maternal pride. My son was a doctor. We had done it. After the ceremony, I made my way through the crowd, clutching the small wrapped box containing his father's watch. I finally reached Jordan, who was surrounded by classmates and the Lawrences. Patricia had her arm linked through his possessively, while Dr. Lawrence clapped him on the back. "Jordan," I called, my voice breaking slightly with emotion. "Congratulations, honey. I'm so proud of you." He turned, and for a split second, I saw something flicker across his face. Was it shame? But it quickly disappeared, replaced by a cool politeness. "Maxine," he said with a nod. "You made it." One of his classmates looked confused. "Maxine?" Before I could speak, Jordan gestured to Patricia Lawrence. "This is my mom, the woman responsible for who I am today," he said, his voice filled with pride and affection. "She and my father have been incredible mentors and supporters through medical school." The words hit me like a physical blow. The room seemed to spin around me as Patricia beamed and accepted congratulations from Jordan's friends. No one seemed to notice me standing there. The actual mother who had given birth to Jordan raised him alone and worked herself to exhaustion to fund his education. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. In that moment, I ceased to exist. After Jordan's devastating introduction of Patricia as his mother, I felt as though I might collapse right there on the spot. My chest tightened painfully, and black spots danced at the edges of my vision. I must have swayed because someone nearby steadied me with a concerned hand on my elbow. "Are you all right, ma'am?" a young woman asked, but her voice sounded distant as though coming through water. I couldn't answer. My eyes remained fixed on Jordan, who was now deliberately avoiding my gaze as he continued chatting animatedly with his classmates and the Lawrences. Patricia Lawrence caught my eye briefly, a look of smug triumph flashing across her perfectly made-up face, before she turned away, her arm still possessively linked with my son's. When I finally managed to take a shaky step forward, Jordan noticed my movement. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face before he excused himself from his group and approached me. He didn't hug me or show any warmth. Instead, he took my elbow firmly and guided me several feet away from his friends. "What are you doing?" he hissed, his voice low and tense. "You're embarrassing me." "Embarrassing you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Jordan, you just introduced another woman as your mother. I'm your mother. I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you." He glanced nervously over his shoulder. "Look, Maxine, this isn't the time or place to make a scene. The Lawrences have connections that are important for my career. They look the part. They fit into the world I'm entering now. And I don't—" The words felt like glass in my throat. Jordan sighed impatiently. "Be realistic. You're a 65-year-old woman who works as a waitress. How does that look to the chief of surgery at Massachusetts General? Dr. Lawrence is offering me a residency position. Do you know how competitive those spots are?" Each word was a knife to my heart. I stared at my son, my beautiful boy, who had once bandaged injured birds and spent Friday nights making pizza with me, and saw a stranger. "So, I'm an embarrassment to you now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "That's not what I said." He checked his watch impatiently. "Look, I appreciate everything you did when I was growing up, but I've moved on to a different life now, and the Lawrences are part of that. Can you please just be happy for me and not make this difficult?" Without waiting for my response, Jordan returned to his family, leaving me standing alone. I watched as Patricia placed a maternal hand on his cheek, and Dr. Lawrence proudly introduced him to colleagues as Our son, the doctor. No one looked in my direction. I had become invisible. I stumbled to the nearest restroom, barely making it into a stall before the sobs overtook me. I pressed my hands against my mouth to muffle the sounds as my body shook with the force of my grief. How had this happened? When had my sweet, loving son turned into this person who could so callously deny me? As I sat there, memories flooded back unbidden. Jordan at 7 climbing into my bed during a thunderstorm, seeking comfort in my arms. At 10, proudly presenting me with a handmade Mother's Day card, covered in glitter and heartfelt words about me being the best mom in the universe. At 14, hugging me tightly after I'd worked a double shift to buy him the specialized calculator he needed for advanced math classes. Where was that boy now? How had he become someone who could look through me as though I were a stranger? As though the lifetime of love and sacrifice meant nothing. In the adjacent stall, I heard someone enter. Then voices from the main bathroom area became clearer. "Did you see that older woman standing alone after the ceremony? The one in the blue dress?" one young woman asked. "Yeah, she looked devastated," another replied. "I heard she's actually Jordan Lawrence's biological mother or something, but he acts like the Lawrences are his parents. That's so messed up. I can't imagine treating my mom that way." "Well, you know Jordan, always climbing the social ladder. The Lawrences are like super connected in the medical community. I guess his real mom doesn't fit his image." Their voices faded as they left the bathroom, but their words echoed in my mind. Was that how people saw my son, as someone who would discard his own mother for social advancement? The thought made me physically ill. I bent over the toilet, retching, though nothing came up but bitter bile. When the nausea passed, I sat back on the cold tile floor, my body still trembling. I pulled my phone from my purse and dialed Doris, my closest friend since we'd taught together 20 years ago. "Doris," I sobbed when she answered. "It's worse than I imagined. He pretended I wasn't his mother. He introduced that woman as his mom." "Oh, Maxine!" Doris's voice was filled with sympathy and outrage. "That ungrateful boy, after everything you've done for him." "I don't know what to do," I whispered. "Part of me wants to just slink away and take the overnight bus home like I planned. That's what he wants me to do, to disappear and not embarrass him." "And is that what you want to do?" Doris asked gently. I thought about it, really thought about it. I remembered my own mother's words to me years ago, when a colleague had taken credit for my work on a curriculum development project. "Standing up for yourself isn't selfish, Maxine," she'd said. "It's necessary. If you don't value yourself, no one else will either." "No," I finally answered Doris. "That's not what I want to do. I've spent 20 years disappearing so Jordan could shine. I've worked myself to the bone, made myself small, sacrificed my health, my time, my own dreams, and for what? To be erased completely." "Then don't let him erase you," Doris said firmly. "You raised that boy. You put him through school. You did what most people couldn't or wouldn't do. Own that truth, Maxine." As we talked, something shifted inside me. The crushing pain began to transform into something else, a slow burning resolve. I remembered working through a bout of pneumonia because I couldn't afford to miss shifts when Jordan needed money for his first-year medical books. I remembered selling my mother's antique silver and jewelry, the last connections I had to my own family history, to cover Jordan's housing costs when his scholarship fell short. "You're right," I told Doris, my voice steadier now. "I won't be erased." After hanging up, I went to the sink and splashed cold water on my face. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Years of overwork and stress had etched deep lines around my eyes and mouth. My once auburn hair was now completely gray. When had I gotten so old? When had I last taken care of myself instead of pouring everything into Jordan? I opened my purse and saw the small wrapped box containing Thomas's watch. I had been saving it for so long, waiting for this day, when our son would become a doctor. Thomas would be so proud, I thought, then immediately corrected myself. No, Thomas would be heartbroken to see how Jordan had turned out, success or not. I carefully applied the lipstick I'd bought specially for this occasion, straightened my dress, and took a deep breath. I would not slink away in shame. I would not allow myself to be hidden like an embarrassing family secret. With newfound determination, I walked out of the bathroom and made my way back toward the reception area. Through the glass doors, I could see the Lawrences hosting what appeared to be a champagne celebration. Patricia was holding court, her perfectly manicured hand resting on Jordan's arm as she laughed with the dean of the medical school. Dr. Lawrence was pouring expensive champagne into crystal flutes, looking every inch the proud father. My simple blue dress from the department store felt suddenly shabby compared to Patricia's designer outfit. My sensible shoes seemed clunky next to her elegant heels. For a moment, my resolve faltered. But then I thought of my mother, of Thomas, of the values we had tried to instill in Jordan, values that clearly hadn't stuck. I squared my shoulders and pushed open the doors. As I entered the elegant reception room with its sparkling chandeliers and white linen-covered tables, I felt completely out of place. The space was filled with well-dressed doctors, proud parents, and jubilant graduates, all holding crystal flutes of champagne and engaging in animated conversation. Money and privilege permeated the air as tangibly as the expensive perfume worn by women like Patricia Lawrence. Jordan stood at the center of a small group, champagne in hand, laughing at something Dr. Lawrence had said. Patricia remained close to his side, playing the role of proud mother with practiced perfection. For a brief moment, no one noticed me, and I had the strange experience of observing my son as a stranger. Might someone successful, handsome, and clearly at home in this world of wealth and achievement. Then Jordan saw me. His smile faltered for just an instant before he composed himself. He whispered something to Patricia, whose eyes flicked in my direction with obvious displeasure. I could see them having a quick, tense exchange, but I continued walking toward the group with steady steps, my back straight, my resolve firming with each footfall. As I approached, conversation in their immediate circle died down. Several people looked at me curiously, clearly wondering who this unfashionable older woman might be. "Jordan," I said, my voice calmer than I expected. "Congratulations again on your achievement." Before Jordan could respond, Patricia stepped forward smoothly, her smile not reaching her cold eyes. "Hello there. You must be—" She paused deliberately. "Jordan's friend from back home. How lovely that you could make the trip." The dismissive introduction hung in the air. A few people exchanged confused glances, sensing the tension. "Actually," I said, my voice gaining strength, "I'm Maxine Hamilton, Jordan's mother." The statement landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of discomfort through the small gathering. Someone coughed awkwardly. Jordan's face flushed deep red. "His biological mother," Patricia amended quickly, her smile tightening. "We've been Jordan's family since his undergraduate days, haven't we, darling?" She squeezed Jordan's arm possessively. I looked directly at my son, waiting for him to correct her, to acknowledge me properly. But he remained silent, eyes darting between me, the Lawrences, and his watching classmates. That silence, something inside me broke free. All the years of sacrifice, all the nights I'd gone hungry so he could eat well, all the hours I'd worked while battling exhaustion, they crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I deserved to be recognized. I deserved to be acknowledged. "Yes, I am Jordan's biological mother," I said, my voice steady and caring enough that people beyond our immediate circle began to listen. "I'm also the mother who raised him alone after his father died when he was 5 years old. I'm the mother who worked 3 jobs simultaneously to put him through medical school." Jordan stepped forward, his expression a mixture of anger and panic. "Maxine, please, this isn't the time or place." "When would be the right time, Jordan?" I asked, not backing down. When would be the right place? After you've completely erased me from your life, after you've fully rewritten your history to exclude the woman who sacrificed everything for you. The room had grown increasingly quiet. More people were watching now, including several professors and the dean himself. You make it sound so dramatic, Jordan said, his voice low and tight. The Lawrences have been incredibly supportive of my education. They've opened doors for me that would have remained closed otherwise. I don't doubt that, I replied, and I'm grateful for any help you've received in achieving your dreams. But that doesn't erase 25 years of motherhood. That doesn't negate the fact that I sold our family home to help pay for your first year of medical school. That doesn't erase the nights I transcribed medical reports until dawn after working a full day at the hospital and an evening shift waiting tables. Patricia made a small, dismissive sound. Well, our financial support has been quite substantial as well. The connections Adam has provided alone, I'm sure they have been. I interrupted, opening my purse. I withdrew a small stack of papers I'd brought with me, a record of payments I'd made toward Jordan's education over the years. I handed them to Jordan, whose hands took them automatically. This is a partial record of my contribution to your education. 20 years of sacrifice documented in bank transfers, loan papers, and second mortgages. I didn't bring it to embarrass you. I brought it because I was proud of what we accomplished together. I thought we'd celebrate together. Jordan glanced at the top page, then quickly folded the papers and shoved them in his pocket. His face had gone pale. Mrs. Hamilton. A young man around Jordan's age stepped forward from the watching crowd. I'm Eric Tanner. I was Jordan's roommate first year. He turned to Jordan. Remember when you showed me pictures of your mom during orientation week? You said she was your hero because she worked so hard to support you after your dad died. Jordan looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. Another classmate joined the conversation. Yeah, and remember when you got that care package with all those homemade cookies during finals week? You told us your mom made them even though she was working crazy hours. Patricia's perfect composure was starting to crack. Jordan has been a part of our family for years now, she insisted. We've provided the kind of support and connections that have made his current success possible. I'm not here to dispute the Lawrences' generosity or importance in your life, Jordan, I said quietly, looking directly at my son. I'm here because I'm your mother, because I love you, because I thought today would be one of the proudest moments we would share together, not a day when you would pretend I don't exist. Jordan's expression was conflicted, a war clearly raging behind his eyes. You don't understand, he finally said. This world, the medical community, it's all about connections, about fitting in. I needed to adapt. By denying your own mother? The question came not from me, but from an older professor standing nearby, his expression deeply disapproving. I needed to fit in, Jordan repeated, but his words sounded hollow even to my ears. The Lawrences, they represent the world I'm entering. They understand it in a way that... He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence while looking at me. In a way that a working-class woman like me never could, I finished for him, my heart breaking all over again. You're right. I don't understand country clubs and sailing yachts and summer homes. I understand working until your back aches and your feet blister to give your child a better life. I understand love that doesn't come with conditions about social status or useful connections. I reached into my purse again and withdrew the small wrapped box containing Thomas's watch. I had planned to present it to Jordan with such different emotions, pride, love, a sense of family continuity. Now I simply held it out to him. This was your father's, I said softly. He wanted you to have it when you became a doctor. I've kept it safe for 20 years waiting for this day. Jordan took the box, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. He knew what it contained. Your father would have been so proud of your accomplishment, I continued. But I don't think he would have been proud of the man you've become." Jordan flinched as if I'd slapped him. He opened the box, slowly revealing the vintage watch Thomas had inherited from his own father. It wasn't an expensive watch, not by the standards of the luxury timepieces I'd seen Dr. Lawrence and his son wearing, but it was a family heirloom, a piece of Jordan's history. "Mom," Jordan whispered, using the word for the first time that day. It slipped out unconsciously, a remnant of the boy he had once been. I felt a bittersweet satisfaction at the small acknowledgement, but it wasn't enough. Not anymore. "I was your mother when we had nothing," I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "and I'm still your mother now that you have everything. Whether you acknowledge me or not doesn't change that fact. It only reveals your character, not mine." With those words, I turned to leave my head high, despite the tears threatening to spill over. I had said what I needed to say. I had stood up for myself, for the truth of our shared history. I couldn't force Jordan to acknowledge me or to be the son I'd raised him to be. That choice was his alone. As I walked toward the door, a dignified older man with silver hair stepped into my path. I recognized him as one of the professors who had spoken during the ceremony. "Mrs. Hamilton," he said, warmly extending his hand. "I'm Dr. Adams' chair of internal medicine. I just wanted to say that your son's accomplishments are a testament to your sacrifice and dedication. Any doctor would be fortunate to have such a strong foundation." His simple acknowledgement nearly undid my composure. I managed to thank him, blinking rapidly to hold back tears. Behind me, I could hear Patricia's attempts to regain control of the situation, her voice artificially bright as she tried to direct attention back to their planned celebration. But the mood had shifted palpably. The truth had been spoken aloud, and it couldn't be unheard. As I stepped out into the May sunshine, I felt lighter somehow, despite the pain still throbbing in my chest. For 25 years, I had defined myself primarily as Jordan's mother, measuring my worth through his achievements and happiness. Now, walking away from the son who had rejected me, I realized I needed to rediscover who Maxine Hamilton was apart from motherhood. It would be a difficult journey, but for the first time in decades, I would be focusing on my own path rather than smoothing the way for Jordan's. The bus ride home was long and uncomfortable, but I didn't notice the physical discomfort much. My mind was too full cycling through memories, regrets, anger, and grief. By the time I arrived back at my small apartment the following morning, exhaustion had settled into my bones like lead. I called in sick to all 3 jobs, an unprecedented action for me, and fell into bed fully clothed. I slept for nearly 15 hours straight, my body finally collapsing under the weight of years of overwork and the emotional devastation of the previous day. When I woke the next evening, I had several missed calls and texts from Doris, but nothing from Jordan. I wasn't surprised. In my heart, I had known even as I spoke up at the reception that my words might cost me my relationship with my son, at least in the short term. The truth often comes with a price. What I didn't know then was that the price would ultimately be worth paying, not just for my own dignity, but for Jordan's soul. The weeks following Jordan's graduation blurred together in a haze of grief and exhaustion. I moved through my routines at work like a ghost, mechanically completing tasks while my mind remained trapped in the painful loop of that day in Boston. Coworkers noticed the change in me. My supervisor at the hospital, Janet, finally called me into her office after I made several uncharacteristic mistakes on patient intake forms. "Maxine, what's going on?" she asked gently. "You've always been one of our most reliable staff members, but lately you seem absent." I hadn't told anyone except Doris about what happened at the graduation. The humiliation felt too raw, too private to share. But something about Janet's genuine concern broke through my defenses, and the story spilled out between sudden, surprising sobs. Janet listened without interruption tissues at the ready. When I finished, she didn't offer empty platitudes or false reassurances. Instead, she said something that startled me with its directness. "Maxine, when was the last time you saw a doctor, not for Jordan, but for yourself?" I blinked, unable to remember. "I don't know. Years, maybe?" "That's what I thought," Janet said, her expression concerned. "I'm putting you on 2 weeks medical leave effective immediately, and I'm giving you the name of my doctor. This isn't a suggestion, it's a condition of your continued employment." I started to protest, but Janet held up her hand. "You're showing classic signs of extreme exhaustion and possible depression. You've spent decades caring for everyone except yourself. It has to stop before you completely collapse." The doctor's diagnosis was blunt severe exhaustion, dangerously high blood pressure, vitamin deficiencies, and the early stages of osteoporosis from years of poor nutrition. "You've been running on empty for so long your body's forgotten what full feels like," Dr. Patel told me. "This isn't sustainable, Maxine." She prescribed medications, supplements, rest, and regular follow-up appointments. When I explained about my 3 jobs, she shook her head firmly. "1 job. That's all your body can handle right now. If you don't make changes, you'll be facing much more serious health problems very soon." I left her office feeling overwhelmed. How could I possibly survive on just 1 income? But as I sat in my car in the clinic parking lot, I realized something important. Jordan was done with school. The financial burden that had driven me to take on multiple jobs no longer existed. For the first time in over 2 decades, I could potentially live for myself. That evening, I received a text message from Jordan, the first contact since graduation. It was brief, and to my mind, wholly inadequate. "I'm sorry about what happened at graduation. Things got complicated. Hope you understand." No acknowledgement of how deeply he had hurt me. No true ownership of his actions. Just a vague apology that placed the burden of understanding on me, as if the problem was my perception rather than his behavior. I didn't respond. After years of making excuses for Jordan, of prioritizing his feelings and needs above my own, I couldn't bring myself to smooth things over this time. The text sat unanswered, a small act of self-respect that felt both foreign and necessary. In the days that followed, I made difficult but necessary changes. I resigned from my waitressing job and the transcription work, focusing solely on my hospital administration position. I started eating regular, nutritious meals instead of surviving on coffee and whatever was quickest. I began taking short walks in the evening, rediscovering the simple pleasure of movement without exhaustion. Doris became my rock during this period. Unlike my other friends who urged reconciliation with Jordan at any cost. "He's your only child, Maxine. You need to repair this relationship." Doris supported my decision to maintain distance until Jordan offered a genuine apology and changed his behavior. "Motherhood doesn't mean being a doormat," she reminded me when doubt crept in. "You can love Jordan unconditionally without accepting conditional love in return." 3 weeks after graduation, I received a small package from Dr. Adams, the professor who had spoken to me at the reception. It contained a kind note expressing again his admiration for my sacrifice, along with a gift certificate for a day spa. "A small token of appreciation," he wrote, "from someone who recognizes true dedication to the medical profession comes in many forms." His thoughtfulness brought tears to my eyes. Here was a stranger who valued my contribution more than my own son had. Gradually, I began reconnecting with old friends I'd lost touch with while working my multiple jobs. I joined a church community that included a support group for parents estranged from adult children. Hearing others' stories similar to mine helped ease the isolation and shame I'd been carrying. "The hardest thing to accept," said Gloria, a woman whose daughter had cut contact after marrying into a wealthy family, "is that we can be good parents and still end up estranged. Sometimes it's not about our failings, but about our children's choices." Those words resonated deeply. I had spent weeks questioning where I'd gone wrong, how I had failed Jordan. But perhaps the more important question was how I had failed myself by making Jordan's life my only priority for so long. At Doris's suggestion, I began keeping a journal pouring out feelings I'd suppressed for years. Writing became a form of therapy, helping me process not just the recent rejection, but decades of self-neglect. As I wrote, patterns emerged. I saw how I had used Jordan's needs as an excuse to avoid dealing with my own grief after Thomas died. How I had made martyrdom of virtue and confused sacrifice with love. "You're not just Jordan's mother," my therapist, whom I finally started seeing after months of resistance, pointed out. "You're Maxine. Who is she? What does she want from this next chapter of life?" It was a profound question, one I couldn't immediately answer. Who was I beyond motherhood? What dreams had I abandoned or never even allowed myself to imagine? The questions were both terrifying and exhilarating. 6 months after graduation, I received an unexpected letter from Dr. Adams. He explained that he had been deeply affected by what he witnessed at the reception and had kept an eye on Jordan during the beginning of his residency at Massachusetts General. "Your son is struggling," he wrote. "Not professionally, he's technically very competent, but he seems isolated. The Lawrence's influence has opened doors but also created resentment among his peers. Several times I've overheard references to how he treated you at graduation. Word spreads in hospital communities and character matters as much as competence in our profession." The letter left me with mixed emotions. I took no pleasure in Jordan's social difficulties, but I couldn't help feeling that there was a kind of justice in his experiencing consequences for his actions. Dr. Adams ended his letter with a surprising invitation. Would I be willing to speak to a group of first-year medical students about the family sacrifices behind their education? Many come from privilege and have never considered the toll their ambitions take on families, particularly those with fewer resources. He wrote, "Your perspective would be invaluable." The invitation awakened something in me, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I had knowledge and experience that could make a difference. My story, painful as it was, might help others. I accepted, and that single presentation led to others. Soon, I was regularly speaking to student and parent groups about navigating the financial and emotional challenges of supporting a child through higher education. I emphasized the importance of maintaining boundaries and self-care, something I had learned too late. I also began volunteering with a program that supported single mothers pursuing education for themselves and their children. Working with these women, many of whom reminded me of my younger self, became deeply fulfilling. I could share hard-earned wisdom while helping them avoid the mistakes I'd made. By the time 8 months had passed since graduation, my life had transformed. I was healthier, engaged in meaningful work, and developing an identity separate from being Jordan's mother. I had moved to a smaller apartment that better fit my single income, but felt more like a home than any place I'd lived since selling our family house. I was arranging books on a new small bookshelf one Sunday afternoon when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors. Doris was away for the weekend, and few others knew my new address. When I opened the door, Jordan stood there. The sight of him was like a physical shock. He looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and less of the polished appearance he'd cultivated during medical school. He wore casual clothes rather than the designer outfits I'd grown accustomed to seeing in his social media posts. "Mom," he said the word, sounding rusty from disuse. "Can I come in?" For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Jordan stood uncertainly on my doorstep, shifting his weight from foot to foot like he used to do as a child when he was nervous. The familiar gesture sent a pang through my heart. "Please," he added when I remained silent. "I'd like to talk." I stepped back wordlessly, allowing him to enter my small apartment. His eyes took in the space, my modest furniture, the few framed photos, the books arranged on my new shelf. One of the photos showed Jordan at his high school graduation, beaming with pride and hope, his arm around my shoulders. It felt like a lifetime ago. "You look different," he said, turning to face me. There was genuine surprise in his voice. "You look good." It was true. In the months since his graduation, I had transformed in ways both visible and invisible. The rest prescribed by my doctor, combined with proper nutrition and reduced stress, had restored some of my vitality. My hair, while still gray, was now styled in a flattering cut rather than the utilitarian style I'd worn for years. I'd lost the gaunt, exhausted look that had become my normal state. "Thank you," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. "Would you like some tea?" He nodded, and I moved to the kitchen, grateful for the momentary reprieve. My hands trembled slightly as I filled the kettle. I had imagined this moment countless times over the past months, played out scenarios of what I would say if Jordan ever contacted me again. But now that he was actually here sitting in my living room, all my rehearsed speeches evaporated. When I returned with 2 mugs of tea, Jordan was examining a framed certificate on my wall, recognition from the medical school where I had recently spoken about family support systems. "You've been working with medical students?" he asked, surprise evident in his tone. "Among other things," I replied, setting his mug down on the coffee table. "I've found I have some experiences worth sharing." An uncomfortable silence fell between us. Jordan sat on the edge of my couch, looking strangely out of place in the simple surroundings so different from the Lawrence mansion where he had spent so much time. "Why are you here, Jordan?" I finally asked, too emotionally exhausted for small talk. He stared down at his tea, then met my eyes with what appeared to be genuine regret. "To apologize. Really apologize, not like that pathetic text I sent." He took a deep breath. "What I did at graduation was unforgivable. I betrayed you in the worst possible way, and I've been ashamed ever since." "What changed?" I asked, unwilling to accept his apology too easily. "It's been 8 months." Jordan's shoulders slumped. "Everything changed. After graduation, everything I thought I wanted started falling apart." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that it made my throat tighten. "The Lawrences, they weren't what I thought they were." He explained that once he began his residency, Patricia Lawrence's behavior had grown increasingly controlling. She expected constant gratitude and deference for her family's investment in his career. She wanted to dictate his specialty choice, his dating life, even his apartment location. Dr. Lawrence, initially a mentor, began taking credit for Jordan's work and treating him more like a subordinate than a surrogate son. "They never saw me," Jordan said bitterly. "They saw a project, a reflection of themselves, a way to expand their influence. When I started pushing back against their control, they turned cold very quickly." I listened without interrupting, noting the irony that he was describing exactly what he had done to me, rejected someone who loved him unconditionally in favor of people who only valued what he represented. "The final straw came 2 months ago," Jordan continued. "I made a mistake during a procedure. Nothing serious, the attending physician caught it immediately, but it shook my confidence. When Dr. Lawrence found out, instead of supporting me, he was furious about how it reflected on him for recommending me. Patricia suggested maybe I wasn't Lawrence material after all." Jordan's voice broke. "That's when I realized what true family means. When I failed, they pulled away. But you never made your love conditional on my success." "No," I agreed quietly. "I didn't." "I've been seeing a therapist," Jordan admitted, "trying to understand why I did what I did, why I was so willing to reject you for people who ultimately rejected me." "And what have you learned?" I asked, genuinely curious. "That I was ashamed," he said simply. "Not of you personally, but of where I came from, of being poor, of the struggle. When I got to Princeton, I felt so out of place. The other students talked about summer homes and European vacations, while I had never even been on an airplane. The Lawrences offered an escape from that insecurity. They made me feel like I could belong in that world if I just reinvented myself. I nodded slowly, understanding the insecurity even as I remained hurt by his choices. And now I understand that what I really wanted wasn't worth what I sacrificed to get it, Jordan said. I threw away an authentic relationship for a fake one. I rejected someone who loved me unconditionally for people who only valued what I could do for them or how I made them look. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I know I hurt you too deeply for that. But I'm asking for a chance to make amends, to rebuild some kind of relationship. I studied my son's face, the face I had memorized as an infant, watched change through childhood and adolescence, and seen harden with ambition and social climbing as a young adult. I saw genuine regret there, but also something more, a humility that had been missing for years. I'm wearing Dad's watch, he said, suddenly, pulling back his sleeve to reveal Thomas's vintage timepiece. Every day since graduation. It reminds me of who I really am and where I come from. The sight of Thomas's watch on our son's wrist brought unexpected tears to my eyes. It was the first genuine connection to his father, to his real history that Jordan had embraced in years. I don't know what our relationship looks like going forward, I said honestly. I can't go back to who I was before, to the mother who sacrificed everything, including her own health and happiness for your success. That wasn't healthy for either of us. I don't want you to, Jordan replied quickly. That's part of what I've realized through therapy. I took advantage of your self-sacrifice. I came to expect it, even demand it. That wasn't fair to you. We talked for hours that afternoon, more openly and honestly than we had in years. Jordan shared more about his residency, his growing disillusionment with the politics of medicine, his struggle to find authentic connections after building his social life on pretense for so long. I told him about my health crisis, my new work with student and parent groups, my gradual process of rediscovering myself. As the afternoon light faded into evening, Jordan looked around my apartment with new eyes. You've built a good life, he said with what sounded like genuine admiration. Without me at the center of it. Yes, I agreed. I had to. When Jordan left that evening, we had reached a cautious understanding. He would continue his therapy, working to address the insecurities and status anxiety that had driven his behavior. I would maintain my boundaries, refusing to slip back into the self-sacrificing role I had played for so long. We would see each other occasionally, gradually testing whether a new, healthier relationship was possible. Our reconciliation was not immediate or complete. Trust once shattered cannot be instantly restored. But that first visit opened a door that had seemed permanently closed after graduation day. Over the following months, Jordan began making small but significant efforts to rebuild our relationship. He called regularly, sent thoughtful texts, checking on my health, and showed genuine interest in my volunteer work. For my birthday, the first he had properly acknowledged in years, he gave me a simple but beautiful silver bracelet engraved with my favorite quote from Thomas, "Love is shown in actions, not words." 6 months after that first visit, Jordan asked if he could join me at the community center where I volunteered with single mothers. I agreed with some hesitation, unsure how he would interact with women whose lives reflected my own struggles. To my surprise and pride, Jordan connected with these women and their children with genuine empathy. He spoke to them not with the condescension I had feared, but with respect and attentiveness. When one young mother mentioned her daughter's interest in science, Jordan arranged to bring simple microscopes to the next session and spent hours showing the children how to prepare slides. "You're good with them," I remarked as we left the center that evening. "I had a good example," he replied simply. A year after his graduation, Jordan invited me to his hospital's white coat ceremony, a formal recognition of residents moving to the next phase of their training. The invitation itself was meaningful, But what happened at the ceremony meant even more. As colleagues and mentors gathered after the formal proceedings, Jordan guided me through the crowd with a gentle hand on my elbow. When we reached a group of his fellow residents, he didn't hesitate. "I'd like you all to meet my mother, Maxine Hamilton," he said, his voice clear and proud. "She's the reason I'm a doctor today. She worked 3 jobs to put me through medical school and taught me everything I know about dedication and compassion." The simple introduction, so different from the devastating moment a year earlier, brought tears to my eyes. One of the attending physicians remarked on the resemblance between us, something Jordan would have once denied, but now acknowledged with a smile. Later that evening, as Jordan drove me home, he asked a question that surprised me. "Are you happy, Mom, with your life now?" I considered the question carefully. My life was so different from what I had imagined when Jordan was growing up. I had always assumed I would return to teaching once he was established, that I would eventually have grandchildren, that our close relationship would continue uninterrupted into my old age. Reality had taken a different, more complicated path. "I am happy," I answered truthfully. "Not in the way I expected to be, but maybe in a way that's more sustainable. I've learned that happiness can't depend entirely on someone else, not even your child." Jordan nodded thoughtfully. "I think that's what healthy love looks like. Not losing yourself in the other person, but standing alongside them distinct and whole." His insight showed how far he had come in his own journey. The entitled young man who had rejected me at his graduation had grown into someone capable of genuine reflection and empathy. Our relationship continues to evolve. There are still moments of tension, still scars that twinge when touched. Jordan's ambition hasn't disappeared, nor has his enjoyment of the privileges his career affords him. But he no longer sees his background or his real mother as liabilities to be hidden. As for me, I've found unexpected fulfillment in helping others navigate the challenges I faced. My experience as both a devoted mother and a woman who lost herself in that role gives me a perspective that resonates with many. I still work at the hospital, but now just one manageable shift that allows me time for my volunteer work and, importantly, for myself. The betrayal at Jordan's graduation, painful as it was, ultimately freed me to discover who I am beyond motherhood. It forced Jordan to confront the hollow nature of status-seeking and conditional relationships. Sometimes, the most devastating moments carry within them the seeds of necessary transformation. I still have Thomas's words framed by my bedside. "Love is shown in actions, not words." But I've added my own corollary, including how you act toward yourself. True love, maternal or otherwise, shouldn't require self-erasure. Sacrifice without boundaries isn't love, it's martyrdom. And martyrs, as I learned the hard way, eventually burn out. If you're watching this and recognizing yourself in my story, if you've given everything to someone who hasn't valued your sacrifice, I want you to know that it's never too late to reclaim your own worth. Standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. And sometimes, paradoxically, it's the greatest gift you can give to those you love. It shows them what healthy love truly looks like. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please leave a comment sharing how you've balanced love for others with self-respect. Don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories of resilience and healing. I read every comment, and your experiences help remind all of us that we're never truly alone in our struggles. Until next time, take care of your loved ones, but don't forget to take care of yourself too.